Hey guys, welcome back. I am Ashish and today we'll be continuing with our comparative public administration module, and we'll be studying today about structural functional approach. And this is a very simple approach, and this will be a very short video. It is a very simple approach. So to give you a very basic idea of what structural functional approach is, it is what it sounds like. Most of the approaches in public administration are what they sound like. ठीक है, जैसा दिखता है सुना देता है वही होता है. So what this means is there are some structures and these structures perform some functions, and this is what we study in structural functional approach. We study some structures that they perform some functions. This is nothing but structural functional approach. It is very simple. We'll learn about that today. The structural functional approach is in social analysis, has been used by various scholars: Talcott, Parsons, Robert Merton, and these all Almond, Apter, Sultan, and all these scholars are there who have studied structural functional approach in social analysis, not in public administration but in social analysis. In 1955, Dwight Waldo referred to structural functional approach in comparative public administration for the first time. So the first person to refer this technique in comparative public administration was Dwight Waldo. Professor Rix, F.W. Rix, whom we will study about later on, approved the idea of Waldo. In 1957, Rix presented an agraria industria model on the basis of this approach. Rix was considered to be the person to have introduced the structural functional approach into the field of CPA. So Dwight Waldo gave the idea, he just referred to this approach for comparative public administration. What Fred Rix did, he gave a model, he actually implemented this in comparative public administration. So he is the person who introduced this approach to comparative public administration, and in 1957 he gave one agraria industria model. We'll learn about this when we learn about Fredericks, do not worry about this. And this model was based on this structural functional approach. He studied some structures, he studied some functions, and he came up with this model, agraria industria model. So we'll study about that later on. Talcott, Parsons, Merton, Almond, Apter, all of those that we have learned about in our first point, all of these scholars did not support its application in public administration. So these were the scholars who analyzed this approach in social analysis, like society में जो structures हैं और वो structure किस तरह perform कर रहे हैं, तो social analysis में उन लोगों ने use किया था. They did not approve of this in public administration. The exposition of structural functional approach in the field of PubEd is that there is a structure of every administrative system. So very simply it says that every administrative system has some structure. There is a structure to every administrative system, and by the structure and its organs, that is components, various functions are performed. So this structure and its organs or the components of the structure will perform some functions. This is nothing but structural functional approach in public administration, that every administrative system has a structure and that structure performs some functions. In this approach, a structure is considered as any persistent pattern of action or behavior. So a structure is something which has a persistent action or a persistent behavior, because structure is something which is permanent, kind of permanent. It changes but almost it remains same, right? So it has a persistent pattern of action, it has a persistent pattern of behavior. So anything that has a persistent pattern of action or behavior is considered as a structure in this approach. And function refers to any consequences of a structure insofar as they affect other structures or the total system in which they are a part of. So functions are nothing but the consequences that are the effect of these structures, right? So these structures affect other structures and affect the society. So whatever these consequences are, these are the functions that these structures are performing. So structure is something which has a persistent pattern of action or behavior, and function is a consequence of these structures. So I hope this is clear to you. And structures may be concrete, such as government departments and bureaus. These are also structures, right? Departments are structures and bureaus are structures, they perform certain functions. So these are examples of concrete structures. Or they may be analytic, such as structure of authority. So if you are a boss or if you are a leader of some kind, so you have an authority with you, right? So that is also a structure because you also perform some functions. So because you are performing functions, you become a structure, and that is an analytic structure. There are some concrete structures like government departments and bureaus, and then there are analytic structures like the structure of authority. So this is nothing but structural functional approach in public administration. We'll see some more points about it. Thus, the structural functional approach is a method of analyzing the functions that are carried out in a society, the structures that are responsible to discharge the functions, and the methods that are adopted in undertaking the functions. So what do you analyze in this approach? This is an approach, so you analyze some things, right? So what do you analyze? You analyze first thing the functions that are performed in the society. Whatever the functions that are performed in society, you analyze those. Second thing is structures that are responsible to discharge these functions. तो कौन से स्ट्रक्चर हैं जो ये फंक्शंस परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं, वो आप दूसरी चीज़ एनालाइज करते हो. पहली चीज़ तो आप फंक्शन एनालाइज करते हो, दूसरी चीज़ आप स्ट्रक्चर एनालाइज करते हो जो ये फंक्शन परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं. एंड थर्ड थिंग यू एनालाइज इज मेथड्स दैट आर अडॉप्टेड इन अंडरटेकिंग द फंक्शंस. तो ये फंक्शंस अंडरटेक करने के लिए आप कौन से मेथड्स यूज कर रहे हो, ये भी आप एनालाइज करते हो. दीज थ्री थिंग्स you analyze in structural functional approach. The supporters of this approach hold that public administration is like a planned dynamic machine which can be studied like a scooter, motor car और cycle and their parts. तो ये एक structure function approach है ना, तो हम ये बोलते हैं कि it is a structure, तो हम उसको analyze कर सकते हैं like a dynamic machine. ठीक है, तो scooter है, motor car है, cycle है, आप इसके अलग अलग parts को analyze कर सकते हो, right? कार के engine को analyze कर सकते हो, कार के brakes, accelerator, हर चीज़ को आप अलग से analyze कर सकते हो. तो ये एक structure है. तो administrative system भी एक structure है जिसके आप parts को अलग अलग एनालाइज कर सकते हो. इट इज अ स्ट्रक्चर, सो यू कैन एनालाइज इट लाइक अ डायनामिक मशीन एंड देयर पार्ट्स. सो दिस, आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर टू यू. Various scholars have laid down what they consider certain necessary structural and functional prerequisites for the emergence of a society. So there are certain prerequisites that various scholars have given that are necessary for emergence of a society. Remember this was a social analysis, right? Talcott, Parsons, Merton, ये सब जो भी हैं ये social analysis था. तो ये authors ने जो भी दिया है, they have given, every author of them have given certain prerequisites which are required for emergence of society. But what Fred W. Ricks did, he brought this into comparative public administration, right? So Fred W. Ricks gave 5 functional requisites for every society. These 5 functional requisites are economic, social, communication, symbolic and political. And these are nothing but the ecological approach, kind of ecological approach. के ये 5 requisite होते हैं हर सोसाइटी में ये 5 requisite होने चाहिए, which are economic requisite होना चाहिए हर सोसाइटी में, social requisite होना चाहिए, communication होना चाहिए, symbolic and political requisite होना चाहिए. These are the 5 requisites that Ricks gave us for every society. And he said that the same set of functional requisites apply to an administrative subsystem. Ricks ने जो भी दिया ये society के लिए दिया 5 functional requisites. But he said that the same set of functional requisites of society can be applied to administrative subsystem in which various structures carry out a number of functions in a specified manner. तो यही आप 5 requisite आप administrative subsystem में भी लगा सकते हो. So you see how he has given us an ecological approach, structural functional approach भी use किया और ecological approach भी use किया. And this will study when we study Fredericks that his approach is a combination of structural functional approach and ecological approach. And this is the proof that he used structural functional approach and ecological approach and he brought his theory by merging these two things together. एक तो रिक्स ने ये किया कि 5 requisites दे दिए जो structural functional approach के होते हैं और फिर उन्हीं 5 requisites को administrative subsystem में भी अप्लाई कर दिया. So this is nothing but structural functional approach with respect to our public administration syllabus. We are done with this. So we will study about one small topic which is institutional approach. This is a old approach which has been done away with. इसको replace करके ही आया है structural functional approach. So this has been replaced by structural functional approach. So this is an old approach and we will study one slide about it. There is just one slide. So we have studied about this actually. Institutional approach is nothing but the approach which traditional thinkers carried out, right? The principle driven approach, the rule bound approach, the structure driven approach. ठीक है, जो traditional thinkers ने जो किया था. If you remember principles of Luther, Gulick and Urwick, principles of Fayol, principles of Max Weber of ideal type bureaucracy, तो ये सब जो भी हैं ये सारे institutional approaches हैं जो पुराने ज़माने में होते थे. These have been replaced now. The institutional approach, sorry for the spelling mistake, the institutional approach to the study of public administration concerns itself with the institutions and organizations of the state. So very simply, what does this approach consist of? It concerns itself with the institutions or the organizations of the state. The core area of this method lies in detailed study of the formal administrative structure. तो जो formal administrative structure होता है ना, जो principle driven structure जो होता है कि rules हो गए, chain of command, hierarchy and all those things, जो formal administrative structure होता है उसको study करने का काम है institutional approach का. The functioning, the rules, the regulations of the executive, as we have discussed, legislatures and departments of the government. तो जो formal administrative structure है उसको analyze करेंगे हम institutional approach में. It regards public administration as a purely technical and non-political organization. We have seen this, that they say that every structure is purely technical and they can be used for both private and public, right? तो purely technical होता है, हम ये principles हर जगह apply कर सकते हैं, private organization में भी, public organization में भी. So they regard public administration also as purely technical and non-political organization concerned with getting things done efficiently. One best way of scientific management, the ideal kind of bureaucracy. So getting things done efficiently was the main focus of institutional approach. It believes in existence of administrative principles which are universally applicable to both public and private organizations. We have discussed this. They believe in universality of principles. They believe that these principles can be applied anywhere and everywhere. हर जगह आप ये अप्लाई कर सकते हो. ये इंस्टीट्यूशनल अप्रोच बोलती है. जो पुराने ज़माने के जो थिंकर्स हैं वो इंस्टीट्यूशनल अप्रोच जो फॉलो करते थे वो ये बोलते हैं. दिस स्कूल ऑफ थॉट बिलीव्स दैट फॉर अ पॉलिसी टू अज्यूम शेप एज पब्लिक पॉलिसी इट हैज़ टू बी डिटरमाइंड इन एन ऑथोरिटेटिव मैनर बाय सम इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ द स्टेट. तो अगर आपको पब्लिक पॉलिसी बनानी है तो उसके लिए भी आपको एक ऑथोरिटी की जरूरत होती है, राइट? ऑथोरिटी, वी हैव लर्नड अबाउट दिस, राइट? यूनिटी ऑफ डायरेक्शन, यूनिटी ऑफ कमांड एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स. सो यू नीड सम ऑथोरिटेटिव फिगर इन सम इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ स्टेट टू फॉर्म अ पब्लिक पॉलिसी. पब्लिक पॉलिसी को आप डिस्कस करके नहीं कर सकते. लाइक इन टुडेज टाइम्स व्हाट वी आर सीइंग इज डिस्कशंस हैपनिंग, राइट? ड्राफ्ट पॉलिसीज आर बीइंग रिलीज्ड बाय गवर्नमेंट ऑन देयर वेबसाइट एंड दे आर इनवाइटेड फॉर कमेंट्स फ्रॉम पब्लिक. दिस इज नथिंग बट discussion is happening, people are getting involved in decision making, right? Participation is happening. But institutional approach does not believe in this. They say that अगर आपको public policy बनानी है, किसी से comment मत लो public से, किसी को कुछ involve मत करो, participate मत कराओ. You need an authoritative figure in some institution to form a public policy. This is what they believed in. The defect of this approach is that it ignores the informal aspects of the organization, and we have studied this all over our module 2, all over our module 1 also. कि ये सबसे बड़ा डिफेक्ट था, उन्होंने informal aspects को इग्नोर किया, खाली फॉर्मल चीज़ों पे ही ध्यान दिया. Hence one cannot get a true picture of how an organization functions in practice. It is predominantly a descriptive approach. ठीक है, खाली डिस्क्राइब करके रख दिया चीज़ों को, प्रिंसिपल्स दे के रख दिए हैं, खाली डिस्क्रिप्टिव अप्रोच है. ठीक है, और उससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं है. इट इज़ ओनली एंड ओनली अ डिस्क्रिप्टिव अप्रोच. दे हैव जस्ट डिस्क्राइब्ड थिंग्स एंड नथिंग एल्स. So this is nothing but institutional approach, and this was the old approach. It has been replaced in comparative public administration by structural functional approach, where we analyze functions that are being performed in society and methods that are being used to achieve those functions, and all those things also we analyzed. So institutional approach is an old approach. An important advocate of this approach is Luther Gulick. We have seen Luther Gulick's principles of administration, right? So we are done with institutional approach also. So thank you for listening to this. We are done with both the important approaches, and in next session we'll go into detail with comparative public administration. So like, comment and share the video if you liked the content, and also subscribe to the channel if you do not want to miss the upcoming video. Thank you for listening to me. Peace out.